board. My name is Sarah Lorenz. I'm the Special Events Manager here at the Dixon. Thanks for attending this week's edition of Munch and Learn. We do have a few pieces of housekeeping information. We're recording, and if you're wondering why, like Julie mentioned just a moment ago, it's because this will be published on the Dixon's YouTube channel. So if you've ever missed a week and you want to revisit a talk, you can find them there. But since we're recording, please do stay muted. We will ask you to remain on mute throughout the entire program. And if for some reason you accidentally unmute, please don't be offended if we mute you. Today we're going to hear from our curator, Julie Pierotti, as she tells us about her great uncle. I'm doing admissions, who was a prominent fashion designer and elected into the Smithsonian, designed gowns for people whose names you are sure to recognize, and also served philanthropically on several charitable boards. If you have any questions throughout the presentation, please feel free to place them in the chat, and afterwards we'll read them to the speaker and get those questions answered. So now I'll introduce Julie Pierotti. Julie is our Martha R. Robinson curator here at the Dixon. And since joining the Dixon in 2007, she's organized a number of exhibitions for the museum, including The Real Beauty in 2018 and Eye to Eye in 2019. Julie, the floor is yours.
Okay, thank you, Sarah. Guys, thank you so much for taking time out of your day to come and listen to me talk. I am so excited about this. I've been excited about it. Lemay, who normally plans Munch and Learns, she got organized kind of at the beginning of the pandemic. And I've had this date on my calendar for basically a year, I feel like. So I've been excited about this and working on it for several months and just thrilled to be able to share it with you. So I'm going to share my screen. And Sarah, I'm going to ask that you tell me if you're seeing the right thing.
We are.
Okay. So I'm going to go to slideshow from beginning. And are you seeing a full screen image?
We do see the next slide still.
You do see the next slide. So I need to go to this one. Now, do you see a full screen, Sarah?
Perfect. Yes, it's perfect.
Cool. Thanks. I'm still learning. Thanks for your patience. Okay, so like I said, I've just been so excited about doing this talk for a long time. I think it's been something I've wanted to do for a while, but in 2019, I think the Dixon started a group called the Fashion Council. After the success of our Isabelle de Borchgrave show in 2017, Lucia Harris, who's a trustee at the Dixon, wanted to kind of keep that momentum going and started what is now the Fashion Council. So one of the things the Fashion Council wants to do is support and encourage fashion-based programming, exhibitions, lectures like the one we're going to hear today. So I really want to thank Lucia Harris and her co-chair Muffy Turley for starting this group, and Lucia in particular for her enthusiasm for this talk and all we do at the Dixon. The Fashion Council is just getting going again post-COVID. So at the end of the talk, I'll have a little slide on how you can join the fun and help support more programs like this at the Dixon. So disclaimer, with that being said, I'm giving a disclaimer. I am not a fashion historian, but I am learning and I am interested, and I've learned a lot in the last few years, really since we did the Isabelle show in 2017, about garments, how they're made, different styles. So I've learned a lot just by preparing for this Munch and Learn too. But I do feel like I am in some ways uniquely qualified, at least in the city of Memphis, to tell Michael Novareece's story because he was my great uncle. He was my grandfather's brother. So I have been kind of scheming this talk, this presentation, wanting to do this for years. So, and thanks to the Fashion Council, I now have the opportunity to talk to you all about all this. So I want to thank a few family members who have helped me with this. First of all, my mom and dad are my biggest cheerleaders, and they shared their photo albums with me and some stories. My Aunt Becky and Uncle Phil, who are my dad's siblings, also shared photo albums that had belonged to my grandmother, and pictures and stories and things like that. My cousin, John Terry, I saw you, you're here, hi. He was, really enthusiastic about this, and really supportive and encouraging. And he very wisely and graciously put me in touch with Robert Nelson, who was my Uncle Mike's partner for more than 30 years. Robert, I can't thank you enough. I see you, and he generously shared his time with me, and he filled in a lot of things, stories I never knew about my uncle, and what a great man he was, and what a talent he was. Robert also fielded many questions from me via email, and Robert, I'm grateful for that. So thank you. So this Munch and Learn has been a little bit of a journey of discovery for me. I've been so grateful to learn more about who I called as a kid Uncle Mike in California. So my dad is also Michael Novareece. And so me and my cousins called him Uncle Mike in California as kids. And it's just been wonderful to learn about his incredible life and his career. Just a second. So just a little bit about his background. And if you can see, can you see my arrow? Sarah?
Yes, I can.
Okay, great. So just a little bit about Michael's upbringing. This is him, he's the one on the right. Michael Novareece was born in 1926 right here in Memphis to my great-grandparents, who were Italian immigrants, Cesarina and Marcello Novareece. He was the fourth youngest boy. So he was the fourth in a family of boys. Let me say it that way. And like many Italians in his youth, the family kind of would go back and forth from Memphis to Italy, but really settled here in Memphis. I think he went to St. Patrick's for elementary school. St. Patrick's is the church behind the FedEx Forum, for those who don't know. And then all four boys went to Christian Brothers High School and graduated from there. Their father died when Michael was young. And I think my Uncle Frank, who is the oldest right here, this is my grandfather, by the way. His name was Vic or Victor, and this was my Uncle Johnny, the two middle brothers there. So I think my Uncle Frank, was kind of a leader in their family in Michael's youth, at least. But also, I'd say the family was close. The brothers were close knit. And as attested by the many cousins that I have on this Munch and Learn today, the community of Italians in Memphis is very close knit and dedicated to each other. So I think the idea of, it takes a village to raise a child. I think that was, part of these boys' upbringing was their aunts and uncles and cousins were all there for them. And they all remained very close, to each other as brothers, but also with their cousins, aunts, uncles throughout their lives. So when the Second World War broke out, all four brothers joined the army. And miraculously, all four survived. So there was this article in the newspaper about it, which I love. It says, Novareece brothers gang up on enemy, which I think is great. And I actually think this was somewhere in my grandmother's house, maybe framed, I can't remember, when I was growing up. So Michael was in, as the article says, the Belgium, he saw action in Belgium and Germany, but I understood this, and Robert confirmed this, that he was in the Battle of the Bulge. And by the time this article was written, sometime in 1945, I think, he was in a convalescent hospital. So he was recovering at this point. Like my grandfather on my mother's side, you didn't hear much about their war experiences. I think that was a generational thing. After the war, they moved on. And Michael did as well. So after the war, he used his, on the GI Bill, he moved to Los Angeles and entered college at Woodbury College in California. And I think, I'm sure it was hard to leave his family behind, but I think he was ready to start his life. And, you know, I think the GI Bill gave him and so many others the opportunity to do that. He entered Woodbury College in the School of Architecture, actually, and switched pretty quickly to fashion design. One thing to know about Michael as a person was that he was an incredibly hard worker. Once he was in school, he excelled at school. He learned everything he could. He worked really hard, and really kind of mastered all aspects of clothing design. I think he was an eager learner. And Robert described him as a Renaissance man. I think that's a nice thing to know about him, was that he was skilled in every aspect of garment design and construction. And that's a rare thing, and something that would serve him well throughout his career. So as a graduation project of sorts, he was close to graduating. And at that point in 1950, he created this beautiful wedding dress for none other than my grandmother, Kay Novareece. So those of you longtime Dixonians and longtime Munchin learners remember my grandmother. She was my biggest fan and came to all of my Munchin learns. And this is her wedding dress. This is her on her wedding day. It's a silk dress with Chantilly lace. And the lace is embellished with seed pearls. She also had a Chantilly lace cap that her veil came down from. So I wanted to show an article that was in the newspaper, and also a little bit more of a close-up of it. So that's her and my grandfather. Aren't they cute? And you can see the beautiful lace that's on her dress, and kind of the lace on the bodice area too, and the illusion sleeves that were on her dress. This dress and the wedding was written up in the paper because Michael was the best. He was not only the designer of the wedding dress, but he was also the best man, and brought material with him. He had bought the fabrics in France, and brought the material with him to the wedding. He also made dresses for my grandmother's new sister-in-laws. They're the dresses that they wore at the wedding, and I think maybe even the flower girl dresses as well. So they got married in the morning. The dress it doesn't really show up in the picture, but it's a little shorter. I guess you would call it kind of like tea length, maybe. And it's just beautiful. I have no idea if this dress still survives. I have to think it is somewhere in our family, but I hope it does. And can you imagine? I mean, this was his senior in college project, and to see how skilled he was already is really impressive. So, by the way, the next year after this wedding, the happy couple here welcomed their first child, which was a son named Michael, who was also my dad. So back in Los Angeles, Michael graduated with honors from Woodbury and began his career. So some friends surprised him with a 3-room workshop where he made his earliest garments. His first employees were his friends from college, and those friends stayed with him for decades. So I think that is a testament to his, his loyalty as a friend and his friends' loyalty to him. And that seems to be a recurring theme throughout, the story that I'm going to tell, and what it keeps popping up in my research is how loyal people were to him and what a great friend he was to other people. He worked very hard in his earliest days. He found work, you know, a lot of people have asked if he did costumes. He didn't really, but early on he did wardrobe for some television shows. So Goji Grant, I think I'm saying that right, and Gordon McRae's television shows, he would do wardrobes for that. Wasn't necessarily costumes. This was never going to be a thing for him. I think these were variety shows, so they were just kind of normal glamorous clothes. They weren't costumes per se. But he did find early success doing these types of things. All the while, he remained close with his family at home in Memphis. This is the site of his first fashion show in Memphis. This is a current picture of a house on North Idlewild. That was my Aunt Josie and Uncle Joe Lucchese's home. That was where he had his first show in Memphis. Again, his family supported him. He had loyal friends at home. Memphis was always going to be a place where people knew him. And there was, you know, enthusiastic, I think, support and proud support for his career. So I thought that was just kind of fun. His clothes from the beginning were high end. I think he decided very early on that he was not going to, you know, he wasn't going to try to design everything. Okay, so there's no sportswear line really. He wanted to focus on special clothes for special people to wear on special occasions. So this is an early example. This is from around 1958. It's a beaded wool dress. And this is now in the collection of LACMA, or Los Angeles County Museum of Art. He was immediately recognized as a top designer in Los Angeles. So by the late 1950s, he's getting press and, you know, participating in charity shows, and his dresses are being recognized as being worn by smart, influential women. This is a cap sleeve dress. It is embellished everywhere. So I'm talking about this dress. And it's got a slight A-line. So his dresses are always flattering for women, I think. And this was a pattern. So you see a couple of these that are kind of variations on this dress that appear, you know, in different kind of vintage clothing boutiques on the internet. I should say that I will be showing you some things from museums like this dress from LACMA, but there's also lots of clothes that I've found on vintage clothing boutiques websites too. So it's not all a consistent background. In 1958, around the time this dress was made, there was an article in a California newspaper about him. And it was describing his clothes as sexy yet refined. And I think that's a term that can really apply to his clothes throughout his career. Okay, so you're never going to see a woman wearing a Michael Novareece dress that's basically half naked. They're dresses that are for, you know, respectable women who want to look their best, I think. And they're all for special occasions. So here's another one from LACMA's collection that's from around the same time. This is from 1959. Beautiful details. This is like a fashion cape type dress, really flattering and elegant with lots of detailed embroidery. Something else that I'll talk about throughout this presentation is the quality of the construction of his clothes. So many of them survive and are in such great condition because they were so carefully and lovingly made. Construction was really important to him. And I think sometimes you hear him say, the dresses should be impeccable on the outside and on the inside. So the garments are really carefully made, no loose strings, nothing's falling apart in these clothes. So Michael also designed beautiful and elaborate wedding dresses throughout his career. I love this one that has this kind of embellished bodice and sleeves, and the apron front detail, I think, is right here is, there it is, really nice, really long cathedral train from about the late 1950s into the early 1960s, somewhere in there. So he also did non-couture clothing, but still very special. So these would be like collection clothes, I think, where you would have a spring collection and a fall collection, just like designers do today. These were still just as special and beautifully and lovingly made, with impeccable tailoring and amazing fabrics. So one thing about Michael is he had a wonderful eye for color and a wonderful eye for fabrics. So the fabric companies would come to him and he would select fabrics that he thought were of great quality, beautiful color, rich color, a lot of rich colors in the garments that he made. This style has this dress has the kind of nipped in waist and full skirt that you kind of associate with the 1950s, late 1950s. This was also a pattern that he would execute variations on. So this is the silk brocade. And then here you see two other dresses that are in the same style. But, you know, subtle variations at the neck and just different details on the skirts and different fabrics, of course. So here is another variation on this same design. This is in a silk with a butterfly pattern on it. Isn't that pretty? And I wanted to show you the label just to talk about the system that was kind of in place for a designer to sell his clothes. So in this image here, you see the Michael Novareece label here, and then this one for Porter's on Madison Avenue. So Porter's was the boutique, and this dress was made by Michael Novareece for Porter's. So Porter's was a long-running boutique on Madison Avenue. It was preceded by Sherry's restaurant, and then today it's the site of the Hermes store on Madison Avenue. But it was a long client of his. So I guess how this would work is he would go to New York, and at the Plaza Hotel, as Robert told me, he would bring 60 or 70 garments for buyers from these stores, not just in New York, but at these small, what are called mom and pop boutiques around the country. The buyers would come and select kind of what they would want for their stores and make their orders for the season. So he built a really kind of loyal following and developed friendships with the owners of these stores and the buyers for these stores around the country. So just a few that you may have heard of, I. Magnin in San Francisco, Maison Weiss in Jackson, Mississippi. There's also a Maison Weiss in Oxford too, I think. And then Gus Meyer had stores in different cities, including Memphis and Nashville. And I don't know if the one in Nashville is still open. It may have closed in the last few years, but it was certainly there even when I was in Nashville at graduate school. There's Sarah Frederick's that was in Palm Beach, but also in Memphis, and then a host of other stores throughout the country. So he would, develop friendships with the owners of these stores, but also with their clientele. So he would travel, he would visit these shops and for trunk shows and custom fittings, and really got to know his clients and what their needs were, what they wanted, and help give them a really custom experience. So one thing I really understand by doing my research is what a customer-oriented designer he was. He would really listen to what what events were they going to? What did they need? Did they need to stand out, or did they need to kind of, are they the mother of the bride or the mother of the groom? Something like that. So I think that's something that's, made him made people as loyal as they were to him, is I think he took the time to understand what his clients needed. So into the 1960s, his reputation as a designer of beautiful clothing spread, beautiful fabrics and timeless silhouettes, really. I think a lot of these clothes, no matter when they're made, I would wear them today. I mean, they're really timeless silhouettes, beautiful fabrics that stand the test of time. That's really a hallmark of his. I mean, I think in some ways these clothes are of the moment, but also have this timeless quality to them too. So there's some clothing ensembles for daytime, like these two-piece sets, like a dress and a jacket combination, and then evening dresses too. So bold fabrics. This is a really beautiful dress, beautiful fabric. This is at the FIDM Museum. So FIDM, Fashion Institute of Design and Merchandising in Los Angeles. It's a bold fabric, but not flashy. So again, a dress like this, seeing the beautiful fabric, lets you know what an eye for fabric he had, and how he made these really, chose really beautiful fabrics for the patterns and silhouettes that he had designed. So in this climate, this is the early 1960s. As I was saying, he really became known for his incredible customer service, his sensitivity to his clients' needs, but also to their privacy, and the importance of individuality and, standing out without, taking over, I think. At this time, in the early 1960s, he became a go-to designer for political wives. This would be something that would last for the rest of his career. This is the era, so this is the early 1960s, the era of Oleg Cassini for Jackie Kennedy. He was, Oleg Cassini created lots of clothes for Mrs. Kennedy. Well, in California, Michael Novareece became known as the Cassini of California. When Bernice Lane Brown, so the wife of the governor of California, commissioned an official wardrobe from him. So I would imagine she gave him, or she had a list of events that she was going to be attending, and he created clothes for those events. So he was kind of her official dressmaker. And that was a big deal. And of course he got wonderful press for that. So there's Bernice Brown. It wasn't just her. He was also a favorite of political wives and governors' wives in other states, like Lucille Clement of Tennessee and Elma Fannin, who was Lucille Clement was the first lady of Tennessee, and Elma Fannin, the first lady of Arizona. So these clients help raise his clout. I mean, the more important and visible I think your clients are, the more your reputation as a designer spreads. So the types of clothing he designed for these women were always professional and appropriate for day to evening events. So he, with these types of clients, he began getting more press, more like editorials, like these pictures. Aren't these dresses beautiful? This is 1965 for the Los Angeles Letter, and these are both Michael Novareece designs. Really beautiful. So as his reputation continued to grow, I think he needed to grow, and his space needed to grow physically. So he moved to a factory, an office atelier on La Cienega. That was 5,000 square feet. That really allowed him to expand his couture business and just expand his business in general. I have a couple of photos of the workshop. My Uncle Phil, and I don't know if he's on here, worked there for a short amount of time in the 1980s. And I don't know if these came from Uncle Phil's pictures or not. At this time, he brought in a woman named Mrs. T, who was a teacher of his from Woodbury, and she became his pattern maker. So here's some shots from his factory. Couture clothing was a specialty of his. So high-end garments with beautiful details, and these were very special clothes, okay? These could run anywhere from $1,000 to upwards of $15,000. So special clothes for special people's special occasions. This is what I keep thinking in my mind, but the details are just amazing. This one is at Fidham Museum. Here is a gold Lemay ball gown. And I wanted to show the detail too, so you could see the kind of the gold threads running through that fabric and how iridescent and just kind of glimmering it must have been. Again, that term sexy yet refined comes to mind when you see clothes like this. Bold patterns that aren't flashy, optimistic colors, optimistic, fabrics. And I love this one so much. Flawless construction. That was something about his clothes in particular were made so beautifully, made to last. Timeless silhouettes. This could, this dress could totally be worn to an event, remember events in, in 2021, maybe when we go back to events, we'll be thinking about wearing clothes like these. So going into the mid to later 1960s, I think he, his designs always feel right in the moment that they're made. But again, they have these timeless qualities to them. Things get a little more mod. I love this beaded pantsuit, silk pantsuit. Look at all the beading on the detail that we have. And it's just amazing that that's all still perfectly intact. So just again, a testament to the quality of their construction. So this one I think might be my favorite. This is a wonderful wedding gown, probably from the mid to late 1960s. Beautiful fabric. I love that we have some details here where you can see the thread, silver threads that are running through here. The cut is, very striking, yet at the same time flattering. This detail at the back is very flattering. And of course, the gorgeous rhinestone collar and the cuff, rhinestone cuff. I think, again, this would be a very special dress to wear. I could totally see this being worn today. It's kind of modern and almost a little space agey without being astronaut, I think. Just, again, very refined. So his celebrity clients continued to grow. And by the late 1960s, he counted Dinah Shore, Judy Garland, and none other than Elizabeth Taylor among his customers and admirers. Also, other actresses, Jane Russell was one that is known to have worn Michael's designs. So these two were part of a sale of Elizabeth Taylor's clothes after she died. So these would be clothes that she hung on to. And I think that says something about how special they were as well. So the more celebrities and famous people, important political wives that wore his work, that helped improve and raise his ranking and his status in the, just kind of the couture set, society set. Going into the 1970s, he continued to grow creatively. And I love, this is an amazing floral lace wedding dress that's also at the Fidham Museum. So some of these, while feeling really of the moment, can be kind of subtle in their colors. And also you see some bold clothes too. These two coat dresses that are from around the late 1960s, early 1970s. So again, you see the same pattern, same basic pattern for both of these, just different fabrics, of course, and different details, different embellishments on them. I'm also wearing a Michael Novareece coat dress today, and it's, beautiful fabric and in perfect condition. So just to interrupt this talk with a little celebrity gossip, I thought I'd tell this little story because this is something that kind of comes up if you just do a basic Google search on Michael Novareece. In 1971, he was presenting his work at a fashion show at the Santa Barbara Museum of Art. So here he is over here. I guess he's kind of narrating, talking about the dresses that the models are wearing at the fashion show. And there was someone in attendance there named Edie Sedgwick. So many of you know who Edie Sedgwick was. She was, you know, an actress. She was part of Andy Warhol's factory. And kind of a, you know, a little bit of a scandal, I think, in her day. There was an after party after the fashion show, and she got in a little bit of a scuffle there, as the story goes. Obviously, I wasn't there. She got in a little disagreement with someone at the party who called her basically a junkie. And things got a little out of hand. She was asked to leave. She went home and took some pain medication to go to sleep, and she never woke up, so that she died that night. And so it's kind of any story about her that, you know, obviously tells the story of her death, says that the night that she died, she was at a fashion show for Michael Novareece. So just kind of a little bit of a gossip story there, I guess. So from, as I'm going to say, from a fallen angel to a perfect angel, this is my mother. Mom, I know you're out there. So I want to reiterate to everyone how close he remained with his family in Memphis. And, you know, his brothers and cousins, of course, but also with his nephews and nieces. In the summer of 1973, my parents, my mom and dad got married, and my Aunt Michelle got married 1 week apart from each other. And Michael designed the dresses for both of those weddings. And it's a great example, you'll see, of him listening and knowing his client and adapting clothing to suit their needs and their personalities. So this is my beautiful mama at her wedding. This is at the Church of St. Therese the Little Flower, right behind Rhodes College. So my mom was more, and that's Michael with her on the altar, kind of probably touching up her dress. My mom was a little bit more of a traditional bride, I think. And so she had a traditional dress, beautiful lace, overlay, lace sleeves, and that nice high neck, beautiful lace veil. And we actually have the design for that Michael did for the dress still in our family, as well as the dress. So I think it's really nice when you can see the translation from sketch to finished product to final version. So this dress and the translation is really perfect here. So you can see it's got this, you know, lace overlay on it, beautiful lace sleeves with beading, you know, the whole thing is lace and beads, and these nice kind of bishopy sleeves here. I asked my mom about what it was like to wear this dress. And she said it was heavy. It was very heavy, but very special. I think that's something that you felt when you wore one of Michael's dresses. It's a special thing to wear something like this, of course, when, and really even more special when, you know, the person who made this is in your family, or in my mom's case, the family you're marrying into. So this dress is, of course, saved and stored somewhere. So he also designed for that wedding my grandmother's dress. So this would be my dad's mom, mother of the groom. And we have the sketch for that as well, which is really great to see the translation from the sketch. We have a sample of the fabric of that dress. I don't know if that dress is still knocking around, but maybe I can find out after this lecture. So it has you know, a little bit more of a contemporary design with the ruffles at the neck and at the sleeves, at the base of the sleeves, at the cuffs. The dress, I guess you can see in the sketch, it's a different fabric that she ended up choosing for this, that they ended up choosing. But to me, that sketch really reminds me, it's just the way that the woman in the sketch is kind of posed, really kind of reminds me of my grandmother. And I think this bold floral print and this light kind of silk, this light chiffony material was great for a summer wedding. And you can even see she had these cute pink shoes that went with it too. So that's kind of fun. So 1 week later, my Aunt Michelle got married. And what a difference between my mom as a bride and my Aunt Michelle as a bride. I think my Aunt Michelle was a less traditional bride. Just to give you a hint of how different they were. This is kind of legendary, a little bit in my family, that she walked in the church. My Aunt Michelle walked into the church she got married at St. Mary's Church downtown here. She walked into the church, instead of "Here Comes the Bride," she had "Here Comes the Sun" by the Beatles. So that kind of set the tone for the wedding. It was much more contemporary. Ruffles at the neck and ruffles on these long, dramatic, huge sleeves. And I asked my mom if she remembered these were actual sleeves. This was not like a cape or anything that she wore over her dress. They were the sleeves of the dress. And of course, she's got a hat instead of a traditional veil. Now, I've seen some pictures that there is a veil on this, hat that went over her face as she was walking into the church. But I think this design, both of these designs are so beautiful and really timeless and could still be totally worn today. So this is also a good chance to point out that while Michael was in town for these special occasions, he would, first of all, visit with family and friends. He had grown up, you longtime Memphians know Pete and Sam's and the restaurant, and Miss Vida, who's was an institution in Memphis at Pete and Sam's. They were close friends. They had grown up together. So when he came in town, usually there was a trip to Pete and Sam's involved, where all their cousins and aunts would all get together and just get to hang out. This woman here is, I think, my Aunt Josie, who was the woman who hosted his first fashion show in Memphis. So this is almost 20 years later. And don't you love her hair? I love it. I think it's so fun. So he, again, stayed so close with his family here in town. But he also used the opportunity while he was in town to visit the boutiques in Memphis that had been customers of his for years. So he would pop in, he would visit these kind of mom and pop type boutiques anytime he came in town, and he would make special appearances. He would also come in town, once a year to do a trunk show at these places. And this is a show at Gus Meyer. These stories, his visits were always covered in one of the Memphis newspapers. So this is from the Memphis Press Scimitar. And this is from July 1973. So that month when my parents and my Aunt Michelle got married, he was here and made some visits to shops as well. Now, some of you Memphis fashion-y people may recognize the model here. It's Babby Lovett. Babby is still a kind of a mainstay in Memphis, like a legend in Memphis in terms of fashion and all things creative, really. So Babby, I don't know if you're here, but hi, great seeing you here. Again, newspapers covered his visits, and a model here we all know at the Dixon is Sally Shy. So she's, long been involved at the Dixon. So he would come and do these trunk shows, and if customers liked a design, he would help them pick out dresses for whatever occasion they had coming up. He might also adjust things based on their body type, what event they were going to, what fabrics they liked. It was a very custom experience. So the end of this article hints at a line of menswear that Michael designed in the 1970s. He had a line for a few years in the 70s. He had been dressing women whose husbands owned a company called Ratner in San Diego. Ratner made uniforms, and they asked him to create a line of menswear, which he did for several years. These there's a few of these still, they're pretty rare on the vintage market, I think, because this was kind of a short-term endeavor for him. They are fine, but they are rare, but still findable, but they have the same impeccable tailoring, really kind of custom details that he was known for in his women's clothing. So his gowns in the 1970s there's a lot of chiffon, a lot of movement to them. When he was in Memphis, he would also swing up to Nashville, where he had a following there at boutiques like Grace's, and got great press in Nashville newspapers. This dress and the Ann Carlton at Grace's is wearing kind of it looks like a variation of it. It's real swingy, very fluid, and lots of kind of dramatic movement, very breezy. So some more of these chiffon kind of breezy dresses here, and this amazing ombre chiffon gown here. This is obviously being modeled by a contemporary model, contemporary to us, from a vintage dealer. He did keep some more conservative designs, still with, kind of a little bit more subtle flair to them for his collections. So like this dress was made in the 70s for I. Magnin in San Francisco. So these a little bit more conservative designs are a nice segue into the clothing that he would make in the 1980s. So here's where this woman on the left enters the story. Dolores Hope was the wife of Bob Hope, and she was a longtime client, and very close friend of his. I think Robert even told me she was his godmother, was Robert's godmother. She introduced Michael to her friends and invited him and Robert to their homes in Palm Springs, Toluca Lake. And their circle included people like Betty Wilson, Jenny Milner, Lee Annenberg. And when the Reagan presidency began, of course, the Hopes and the Reagans were friends. All of these women began spending more and more time in Washington as wives of Reagan's so-called kitchen cabinet, so meaning his unofficial advisors. So when the women would go to Washington for events they were attending, like the inauguration and like President Reagan's 70th birthday, they would go to Michael and say, I need a complete wardrobe, basically. Here's the events I'm going to. Please make some clothes for me. So they needed to, these trips required a certain kind of dressing, I think. They needed to be sure there were no repeats between them and their friends. Of course, you don't want to show up at the party wearing the same thing as one of your friends. This is Washington, so it has to be sort of conservative. It has to be a little bit more reserved, but it's the Reagans, so it's got to be kind of glamorous. And they would bring in their jewelry, the jewelry that they had planned to wear, and say, here's my diamond necklace, here's my emerald necklace. Can you make something to go with this, to match this? And I'm sure that was also, really thrilling. So, so from big public dinners like this to more private dinners like these, I will say that I don't think Michael really designed for Mrs. Reagan. She was close with Galanos, the designer. And of course, and that's another thing, you don't want to upstage Mrs. Reagan, of course, while you're attending these things. So you would go from public, dinners, private dinners, daytime events, you would need clothing for that. So these daytime events, and here's just some examples of some clothing that he was making around this time. These events required these kind of smart ensembles, beautiful fabrics with great details, as you can see in this window pane suit. There's another coat with this nice quilting detail that's made around the same time. Playful, and these dresses are playful and bold, yet still, still a little conservative, not showing too much. So lots of glitz in the 80s. So this coat and dress ensemble was a pattern, a style that he had some obviously success with in the 80s. There's this example from LACMA. There's several variations on it, including this coat. And look, there's my mom again, modeling this dress, I guess on a visit to see my Uncle Mike in the early 80s. And so there's a shorter version here. This is also at LACMA. A different color, different embellishments on this one. And this cropped jacket and dress ensemble here. So again, glitz and fun, but still, a little conservative too. So you're never going, a woman who's wearing a Michael Novareece dress is never going to embarrass herself. She's always going to look really, refined and smart and well put together. This dress is at the FITM Museum, and it was in an exhibition that they did a few years back on flowers in fashion design. So I wanted to show this jacket because it is amazing. It's over the top. So over the top 80s, but not over the top 80s flashy or trashy really. This was custom ordered by Dolly Cole, who's a wife of a GM CEO, I think, GM bigwig. When she ordered this dress, I think I read this on the Etsy listing for this, it was somewhere around $15,000 for this jacket. Isn't that amazing? But look at what amazing condition it's still in. With all of these sequins, it's still in perfect condition. That's how, and still looks fabulous. That's how special these clothing, these garments were and how well made they were. So with fancy clothes and clientele, he got great press in the 1980s in newspapers, definitely on the West Coast, but around the country. And it was an era of real prosperity for his business. He brought on more employees to meet the demand. I love this article called Novareece and the Seven Petticoats. And it's a really nice article about him and how he listened to his clients. And how women could go to these fittings and get a real special experience, and how he would listen to what, where was the bride going? What did she need to wear for that? Who else was going to be at the party? So some more examples of these kind of playful and fun, exuberant dresses from the 1980s. There's this wonderful 80s pink puff sleeve gown. Some dresses with bustle details here, and lots of ruching in the 1980s. I love this one on the left that's at the FITM Museum. There's some more shorter party dresses here. The ribbons at the sleeves has been called gift wrap ribbon, gift wrap dresses. With this, the one on the left with the great tulle skirt is very fun. These short dresses are called today prom dress styles. I don't know if they were actually worn to someone's prom or not. It'd be a very fancy prom dress. Some more ruching here. So this was done for iMagnet in San Francisco. It's got that flattering ruching, but still the standout detail of the detail right up here at the shoulder. So there were still some more. Of course, he's still designing gowns or dresses, excuse me, for his boutique clients. So this was a dress that was made for Bergdorf Goodman, which of course is a little more than a mom and pop boutique for sure. And then still these, beautiful, impeccably made dresses. So this again has that bishop sleeve style that is recurring kind of as we've seen throughout his career. So I have a few more details of some of these garments from the 1980s. I love this one to be able to see the quilting detail here is very nice, and the detail of the embroidery. And again, it's amazing what good of shape all of these are in. Here's another one. Okay, so by 1990, Michael's starting to think about retirement. He was still, and this is him and his brother. So here's my grandfather, my Uncle Johnny, and my Uncle Frank here. My grandfather died in 1990, so it had to have been 89 or very early 1990. somewhere around there. He still has his A-list clientele, very loyal following. So Marcello Borghese, Estee Lauder, of course, still people like Dolores Hope and her circle, very loyal friends and clients. He's still traveling, but these mom and pop shops, so this is an article of him going to Sarah Fredericks in Palm Beach. These mom and pop store owners are starting to retire. So some of these boutiques that had been longtime clients of his were starting to close. So I think in that way, he's starting to think about what is the future going to be like for me? Magnin files Chapter 11 somewhere around this time as well. So he starts kind of thinking about scaling back a little bit. There's some dresses that are from the early 90s, like this one. These two are really beautiful. So you have the shorter version of a silk sheath dress and then the longer gown that has the beading detail. Isn't that amazing? It's just perfect to see the way the beads all kind of follow the pattern and move, help the gown have this kind of sense of movement and action to it. Here's some shorter dresses that are a little bit more daring from his last years, so last collections of his. In 1992, he, officially retired. I think he had started scaling back before then. And he could see that things were changing in the fashion industry. So these mom and pop stores that had been a lot of his, source of success were starting to close. So he kind of retired while he was on top, basically. And he and Robert could enjoy a nice retirement at that point. So this is 1992. There was a retirement party for him at FIDM at FIDM. And as the article here says from the Los Angeles Times, it says, it should be rare and wonderful, and Dolores Hope will undoubtedly sing her toast. So he kept his friends, his clients, they were so loyal to him to the end. And I think that says a lot about who he was. So at that point, 1992, he enters this retirement phase of his life where he spends a lot of time and energy on charity work. He donated his clothing archive to FIDM. He donated, that's another thing, he donated all the equipment that had been in his factory to charities. He lectured and mentored at FIDM and provided scholarship opportunities for students to attend that school, which is really great. He also was involved with charities like Meals on Wheels, involved at his church, which was St. Vincent, I think, in Los Angeles, involved in lots of Catholic charities in California as well. This picture is from an interview that he did. And if you're interested in this, I recommend you go to YouTube and search Michael Novareece fashion. And there's an interview that he did. It'll come up. It'll be the top of your search results there, where he's talking about his career a little bit and why he decided to retire. But this was in 1992. And around that same time, the Smithsonian Institution inducted him maybe into their kind of list of designers important designers from the 1970s and 1980s. And in the interview, when the interviewer, I guess, is asking, why do you think you were chosen? He said that on the panel of women that were on the committee to select the designers for this honor, they were asked, whose clothes do you still have in your closet from this time? Whose clothes do you keep the most? And all of them answered Michael Novareece, because his dresses were so beautiful, so well made, and so timeless. So I think that is just an amazing honor for him. It's just amazing to think that the child of Italian immigrants from Memphis, Tennessee would receive an honor like this. It's very, very special. So he died in 2010. And here's his obituary. And I just wanted to show some pictures of him in youth and toward the end of his life. I feel like a lot of people have come up to me as I've been, kind of trying to promote this a little bit on Facebook and Instagram. It's like, I had no idea about this. And I think he's a little, hopefully this is the beginning of a renewal and interest in his career. I think in Memphis, he's a little bit underappreciated because his career is he's not a Memphis designer. He's a designer from Memphis. His career was spent in Los Angeles. Also, there was no mass line of his. So there's no like Michael Novareece for Target or Michael Novareece at Macy's or anything like that. His clothing was very special. It was for a limited, limited clientele. But he remains respected among vintage lovers. And one thing that's really fun is another thing, if you kind of Google him, this pops up, this coat that Tracy Ellis Ross, who's this amazing actress, who's in, TV shows, movies, things like that, wore this coat of his to the American Music Awards in 2017. And she wore it on stage. And I think she kind of dramatically took it off on stage. So his name kind of came up and then it was known that she was wearing a Michael Novareece coat at that point. So hopefully that's kind of the beginning of a resurgence of interest in his career and a renewed appreciation for the amazing career he had and the beautiful, beautiful, glamorous clothes that he made over his 5-decade, career. So if you're interested in finding Michael Novareece's clothes, they are definitely there. In Memphis, you can go to Flashback. I know Millette has had clothing by him as long as she's been running her store. There's a new vintage store on Central called Fox and Cat Vintage. And she, Catherine Gore, Cat Gore, who was actually, I think, my intern one summer here, carries Michael Novareece clothes. Of course, you can go to First Dibs, eBay, Etsy, and then Shrimpton Couture is a website. It's kind of a leading vintage website. And I really recommend kind of clicking around on there as well. So I want to thank you all for listening to me. Ooh, I went over, I'm sorry. But if you have any questions, I'm happy to answer them. And of course, if you'd like to support more fashion and textile-based programming at the Dixon, I hope you'll consider joining the Fashion Council. You can email mdavis@dixon.org or always just give us a call at the main line here and we'll take care of you. So thank you so much. Sarah is gonna facilitate some questions and Sarah is good at reading those. I'm not so good at finding them on here and answering them. Go ahead, Sarah. Sarah, I can't hear you.
Did that work?
Yes.
Okay, that always happens. Please, if you have questions, go ahead and put them in the chat. We just have one at the moment. But Julie, thank you so much for that wonderful talk about your great uncle. You did such a great job telling his story. And I'm sure that I speak for the whole group here that we are such fans of your judgment and Kevin's judgment on what will make an exciting presentation, talk, or exhibition. You always know how to present such great educational, entertaining experiences. Also, thank you everyone else for attending. Let's see, we've got one question so far. We'll get to that.
Okay.
Ellen Perelson asks if Michael ever did theatrical costuming.
Not really. Costumes weren't really his thing. I think he was pretty, it's kind of amazing that he was able to know what he wanted to do and kind of stuck with it. He wanted to focus on couture clothing. I think some of his designs I've heard were used in films, but he didn't make them for films. And that just wasn't his, his line of work. So I think that's a high pressure from what I can only imagine what a high pressure line of work that is. So I think he catered to a different clientele.
Julie, your response was confirmed by Brian Smith, who is in our audience.
Oh, thank you.
Who says some of his designs did appear on Broadway. As an example, an actress named Elaine Stritch wore one of his gowns called A Delicate Balance in 1996.
Elaine Stritch is very well known in the Pierotti house because she appears on a few Law and Orders that my husband and I love.
Well, that's funny. Mostly we have a lot of comments to say thank you and to say how interesting this was. But also we want to thank everyone here for attending. Next week's program will be a talk by our museum director, Kevin Sharp.
Really?
And he will take a closer look at the Dixon's permanent collection. If you have not, then there's a couple other Dixon notes. If you have not signed up for our plant sale, that's happening this Thursday, Friday, and Saturday. Thursdays are members only. And there are just a small number of spots available on Friday and Saturday. We also invite you to come in person to the Dixon, make a reservation, and come see our current exhibition, America's Impressionism. You have until May 9th. That is, May 9th is also the date of our event, Symphony in the Gardens, which will be in person, socially distanced, and we're going to have a limited audience. So please purchase your tickets if you'd like to attend. And please join the Dixon no matter where you live. If you're not a current Dixon member, we would love to have you and love to have your support. And you can consider getting a gift membership for your friends. Also, if you have other friends that live in Memphis. So thank you very much for attending. We'll see you at the plant sale at the Dixon or next week at Kevin's talk about our permanent collection. Take care.
Thanks, guys. Dad, thank you. Thank you, Robert. Thank you to all of my family. I really appreciate everybody tuning in. It's been a little, getting a little verklempt looking at some of these sometimes and thinking about my family and, some of you I see like Gina and John Terry, y'all, I hadn't seen y'all in so long because of COVID. It's just kind of nice to be able to see y'all on here and share these wonderful memories of our family and this special person in our family. Hey, Ralph, I see you on there too. So it's been kind of a little, I don't know, emotional seems kind of dramatic, but we are Italian and we are dramatic. So maybe I'll say that. It's been fun to do this and hope for more to come, more research to come out of this and greater awareness of him and his career and his contributions to American fashion in the 20th century. Hopefully more will come out of this Munch and Learn. So I appreciate y'all being here and being so engaged, and your comments are so nice. And I hope to see you all at the Dixon soon. Oh, I do, if anybody's hanging on, I do have some garments that I have here. Rena, I saw her on here. Hey, Rena. Rena brought me this kimono that my Uncle Mike made for her mother, who's Catherine Chioza. I think Rena told me that, I didn't mention this, but my Uncle Mike, in addition to be a talented designer, he was a great cook. And I think he also appreciated really good cooking. And everybody knows our Aunt Catherine was a wonderful cook. And I'm sure he enjoyed many meals at her home throughout the years. And he gave her this kimono, which I have here. It's really beautiful. Of course, I'm wearing a vintage Michael Novareece coat dress. Doesn't really fit me the way it should, but it's not all the way buttoned. And then I have some more dresses here. And what I'll say about all of these, this is kind of a jacket that would go with the dress, is how beautiful the fabrics are. The weight of them, the way they feel is just special. It just feels special. So these are just little, kind of garments I've collected over the years on websites like Etsy and eBay and things like that. You can find them there, or there's vintage dealers out there that sell his work too. So it's out there if anybody wants to collect it. And if you do, let me know. You never know. Hopefully this can turn into, I'd love to see an exhibition of his work happen somewhere down the road. So hopefully this is the beginning of maybe a spark for something like that.
Well,
thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. This was so interesting.
Thank you so much. So sweet of y'all to take time to to listen to me gab at on something like this. It's been a lot of fun.
And I want to say, I grew up down the street from your dad and your Aunt Becky.
All right.
Yeah, your grandmother Kay.
Yeah.
They lived down the street from me when I was growing up.
Oh, cool. So, love that.
So I'll have to come meet you when I come back to the Dixon.
Please do. You can see my dad with all the liquor behind him at the liquor store.
Okay.
That's his screen there.
I can't see anybody.
We're real classy.
Okay.
Well, I'll give you just a minute to see him, and then we'll sign off.
Okay. Sorry, Sarah. I mean, let us, we Italians will stay for a long time.
Do what you want to do. There's
something known as the Italian goodbye, where you say goodbye, and then you say 5 minutes later, you say goodbye again. And then maybe 10 minutes later, you give a hug and say goodbye. And then you're finally like, okay, I'm really leaving this time. Goodbye.
I don't have anywhere to be.
So but, we'll kind of approach this whole thing as a big Italian goodbye.
Well, does anybody else have any questions before we sign off?
No.
All right. Well, thanks very much. We'll see you next week.
Thank you, guys.
Thanks.
Bye.
Love seeing y'all.